Hi, everyone. So happy for you to join us today. I'm Lee Tesler. I'm a technology strategist at Amazon Web Services, and I'm honored to be joined today by Jeremy Dean, Chief Architect at Foundation Medicine, for this joint presentation. So I'm a principal at AWS. Well, a lot of what I do is work at the intersection of life sciences and cloud technology, working amongst our life science customers to help them with some of their most pervasive problems. I'm a computational biologist by training. So I became very enamored early on about the connection between the devices and the setup of the wet lab experiments and the downstream data and analytics that are needed to bring science forward. So I've been at that intersection developing tech for about 20 years. And most recently, I actually spent 8 amazing years at Thermo Fisher Scientific, leading product teams in smart devices, in connected workflows. And one of the things that we found was that there are just some pervasive data issues in pharma and at life science and biotech companies, issues of data movement, issues of data governance, misunderstandings of the cloud. And I realized that this was not something that one software maker has the responsibility to fix, or one hardware vendor can really fix this. And I thought that the tech industry could play a role there. So I joined AWS around 2 years ago, been working on these kind of problems, and excited to share with you the type of frameworks that we're coming up with and sharing some success stories. So on today's talk, I'm going to give learning objectives. First, I'm going to start with 3 guiding principles that we speak about with customers around lab modernization. We'll hear from Foundation Medicine on the global data lab and compute platform that they've developed and is in production today. And finally, we'll talk about how to get started with AWS, the services, the architectures, and the partners that you can get started with. But quickly, about AWS for life sciences. Since 2013, we've had this life sciences practice at AWS, helping leading biopharma companies migrate to the cloud to optimize their business processes, to accelerate their science, and to build their business in a secure and scalable manner. And whether it's Moderna, who's using machine learning and analytics on AWS for designing all of its mRNA molecules, whether it's AstraZeneca, who's doing their virtual screening and binding prediction on AWS, or Lilly, who does their HPC to broaden the use of cryo-EM data across their organization. In all of these cases, the industry is really pushing the envelope at the intersection of the science and the technology. It's keeping us on our toes. And our hope is to support you in with that technology. Our hope is to help you take what's happening in your research labs, in your research platforms, to help you scale it effectively across your organization, and then help you take that across the globe, or to whatever scale that you're aspiring to. And together with our partners, we offer services, guidance, and consulting offers across the life sciences value chain to help life sciences customers accelerate the design of new molecules, to design intelligent clinical trials, to build smart factories, all the way through effectively scaling and using the growing amounts of post-market and adverse event data and real-world data. So we help across the value chain. So let's dive in. So 3 guiding principles for lab modernization. Guiding principle 1, bringing wet lab data to the cloud accelerates science. So as far as digitalization of labs and R&D has come, organizations I speak with are still making the shift to connected labs that can scale beyond just a pilot project or one workflow, but across their organization. Labs see that the job of moving data from instruments to the place where it gets analyzed, that job takes up precious time. It could introduce mistakes. It could hurt reproducibility. Biopharma customers often tell us that the job of finding, accessing, and cleaning data takes up around 80% of their time when they try to do that, instead of getting full value from the data. Researchers have more digital tools than before, more systems, but when those systems are disconnected from one another, it can detract from the coordination that's needed. Coordination of the information, of the people, of the data that's needed to push discoveries forward. And then finally, for many organizations, they struggle with reducing the silos needed to create collaborations, and that's internal and external collaborations to scale the partnerships that are needed. And we're now at a place where the breadth of cloud compute, storage, data, and analytics are so broad that it is really best to conduct science on the cloud as early and as thoroughly as possible. And why is that? So companies are now connecting wet lab data to the cloud to enable entire R&D organizations to have data automatically transferred from on-site to the cloud. Connecting wet lab to the cloud is creating unified governance possibilities so more users can find and access that data. Cloud is enabling labs to automate between lab systems better, especially as more scientific software vendors are relying on the AWS backbone. And then finally, the cloud is enabling groups to embed high-performance computing, HPC, and machine learning into their science with fewer friction points. And this is not just talk. The numbers are actually on the impact of this. So in March, the Hackett Group published a study on cloud adoption for R&D organizations that were using cloud for a year or more. And they found that these groups had a 17% reduction in FTEs needed for manual data movement. R&D groups running on the cloud saw a 33% reduced unplanned downtime. They found a 75% increase in ability to match disparate data sets. And resoundingly, R&D organizations saw a 50% increase in product pipeline throughput. And that actually was a time-dependent effect. So if you looked at cloud groups using cloud for more than 7 years, they had a 100% increase in product pipeline throughput. So what's the guiding principle here? So part of achieving these outcomes is setting metrics for your organization that lead you in the right direction. Metrics like terabytes per data stored on the cloud with cost intelligent tiering, right, to deliver automatic cost savings. Metrics like new users requesting access to data sets. It shows you, the applicability of your data across an organization. A metric like % of systems that can communicate through the cloud or through REST APIs. Number of machine learning users in your organization. These kind of metrics can help you set that sort of North Star and help you build consensus for the direction you want to go. So that's guiding principle 1. Guiding principle 2, treat your R&D data as a product to find new uses and users of that data. So at the end of the day, the product of a lab is its data. And the AWS Digital Lab strategy is an evolution of the data lake, and I'm going to show that quickly. In this approach, we start with the data as a product principle, where you have data producers and data consumers that drive productization of data coming from a single or multiple data lakes. So one tenet of this is self-service. So you have a self-serve platform where consumers can find, access, and use data, and producers can build and maintain data products on this data lake or this data mesh. Another key principle is unified policy management, centralized governance of this. And a final tenet is seamless data movement through and around this data mesh through event-driven architectures. And what we've done is, if you follow the graphic, we've extended this data strategy to the lab by focusing on the personas that you see in green and their responsibilities. So in a fully realized digital lab ecosystem, you need the following. You need the applications that your wet lab scientists interact with to design their experiments, to manage their samples. This is your lab informatics, your LIMS, your ELN that supports their workflows. You also need your instrumentation stack connected, and that's made up of your instruments and everything that supports data acquisition, like your chromatography workstations and robotics. You need high-performance computing services available here to support those large-scale data processing tasks. You need an AI and ML toolkit for data scientists to build models and deploy models to accelerate the science. You need your analysts to be able to build dashboards and operationalize the data. And of course, IT is responsible for keeping it all secure and available and performant. And so what we see is that these these personas can be producers or consumers of these different capabilities. And that's one of the benefits of this approach, is that it lets you think about the end user and who's the stakeholder in your situation, who are you trying to help, and how might they want to consume and produce data throughout this data mesh. And another benefit of this is it lets you consider the journey of the data, which gets to guiding principle number 3. Bring R&D systems and teams together with cloud-based events. And so I'm going to take a moment to describe an architectural principle, a cloud concept called event-driven architectures. And so EDA lets you build applications based on independent services that can publish events, consume events, or route events. And so 3 concepts. One is queuing. This lets you send information point to point in an asynchronous manner. Pub/sub lets you fan out messages in a one-to-many kind of way. Event bus lets you send particular types of messages to particular subscribers, and it allows for very fast messaging. So these are 3 fairly simple concepts, right? But they're actually the backbone for many of the modern applications that we use in our everyday lives. And we're applying these to labs now. And so to describe this, what I'm illustrating here is a sample testing workflow or a sample testing ecosystem in a fully realized digital lab. And what I've done is I've overlaid the digital lab with some production and consumption steps using cloud events. So we start when a lab receives a sample, or maybe they synthesize a new molecule to go into some testing cascade. They initiate the method in LIMS that sends run plans to the instrument. And from those instruments, that data gets ingested to that data mesh automatically and turned into immutable products on that cloud data mesh, made instantly available to scientists around your company. Depending on the type of data, it can be sent in a number of ways. So simple data, like the location of the data, can be sent back to your LIMS to make sure that system knows where everything is. Operational metrics can be pulled out, brought to your operations team to take a look at utilization and monitor quality metrics. But those same processes, using those same type of events, you can send that data to a high-performance computing workflow for complex tasks like your genomics data processing, image data processing, and onward. And you can do that without copying the data set from one system to another, where you might lose lineage information along the way. So you've analyzed that data. You can compare it with related data sets around your company. Bring other data to bear, maybe expression data, maybe your SAR tables. Bring data together to find comparisons. And then, very critically, you can bring this data into an AI workbench for meta-analysis to make recommendations on the science, make recommendations on the molecules, on the protocols, and create this valuable feedback loop here. So, this is the direction that we're seeing a number of companies take when they start to think about these 3 guiding principles. And so I'm happy to introduce now Jeremy Dean, who's going to talk about their journey at Foundation Medicine.
Thank you. So a little bit about Foundation Medicine. We create comprehensive genomic profiles and use them to recommend clinical trials or treatments for metastatic cancer patients. And that information, those insights, are used by oncologists so she can recommend what she wants to do with her patient. And with our services and our assays that we provide, we process thousands upon thousands of samples per day across numerous labs located in the US and Europe. And so we're constantly sequencing. We have 70 plus sequencers working at any given time, producing vast amounts of data that needs to be analyzed from a genomic perspective. And it needs to first go transferred to the cloud where we have our genomics platform. And one of the challenges we saw with this was the cost of doing that genomic analysis locally, in terms of maybe we thought about doing edge computing, or maybe we thought about other solutions where we process directly off the sequence data locally. But in the end, it just wasn't cost effective. It impacted our turnaround time stability, which we obsess over because we're talking about metastatic cancer patients that need this information right away. And so we knew we needed to do something about this. So the first solution I want to talk to you about is a data transfer utility that we created. And we built this on top of an AWS service called AWS Data Sync. Now, we have been using this internally for other purposes. And just a little bit about AWS Data Sync quickly. It is a service that allows you to specify a source and a destination, say S3 to S3 or NFS to S3 or NFS to NFS, and actually takes care of the job of doing the transfer and then doing the verification, which is often the hard part of knowing that source and destination match, and then finally producing a manifest of what was transferred. So if you get audited, you can actually show, no, source, everything on source was transferred to destination, and I can prove it to you. So we took this great service that we had had good experience with, and we built a cloud-native modular architecture, event-driven architecture around it, knowing that there might be pieces within these different modules that we could eventually delegate to AWS Data Sync or another cloud-native service. But for now, we were going to build it from a bespoke perspective. We would implement it. But because we can swap in and out components or modules, we can then take away some of the heavy lift or services that we don't want to have to maintain. We want to be able to focus on delivering solutions, not building commodity pieces of software or services. And the service, we did it in the form of focusing first on getting sequence data from the laboratory up into the cloud. And we built it in forms of different modules. So the first module, the transfer trigger, which I'll show on the left there, is what's monitoring the sequencers. And when it sees the sequencer starting a run, it immediately kicks off and starts transferring data that the sequencer is writing. So we're transferring this in near real time, saving, and then it contacts the scheduler and says, we want to, what should be transferred. We then take that information, the source, the destination, the data that needs to be copied and the parameters that we want it copied under, and we send it to a factory. And essentially what we do is we then delegate everything to AWS Data Sync, and Data Sync does that hard lift of copying everything from source to destination for us. And then we built in monitoring up for it, and we take advantages of the events that are coming out of Data Sync to react to those events. So we would start by copying, say, files 1 through 101, and Data Sync would do that and say, I'm done, and I was successful. And we'd say, okay, is the semaphore available in that directory that says the sequencer is done? No, it's not. Okay, do another execution for me. And Data Sync would. It would do 101 through 2002 or something like that. And we would just iterate based upon those events. Every time an event would come in, we'd say, okay, is the semaphore there? No, it's not. And then finally, that semaphore would be there. We'd be like, great, we're done. And now we can tell our genomic platform to start genomic analysis. This led to a lot of turnaround time consistency, and in some cases, even turnaround time improvement. And in addition, it allows us to also react to fail events because, as we all know, things fail. And so with that, Data Sync will say, oh, I couldn't do this execution. I couldn't transfer these files. That's fine. That's great. We have a component in our monitoring module that reacts to that and says, you know what, can we redo that? Or can I start back over again? And in a lot of cases that will happen. And so if for some reason some EC2 went down that was doing the copying, we can react to that and restart that. And so it doesn't take human intervention to go and resolve problems. We can have a very resilient architecture by reacting and then self-healing from these problems in an automated fashion. And this allowed us to, again, link what's being created in our wet labs with what we need to do within the cloud. Which brings me to my second example. When we get to the genomic analysis, we obviously, again, concern around turnaround time. And we've got thousands upon thousands of analysis jobs or tasks that need to be executed within our analysis pipeline. And so what we do is we create a graph, a directed acyclical graph, or a DAG, if you will, of what needs to be executed. And then we greedily go and grab what we can. So if A and D need to be done for H to go once, then we immediately kick off, A and D. And when those are done, then H can kick off. And so we know that we want to execute this in a high performance grid. And we had previously used COT software to do this, but then moved to AWS Batch to do it in a more performance scalable way. And a lot of those tasks require different instance types that either more memory or more storage or different level of processing that needs to happen. And so we're able to target pools of those within Batch to the specific type of tasks that need to be done. And again, this leads to a much more performant genomic analysis, a much more extensible, scalable genomic analysis that we can do. Without getting too much into the details, again, we take this compute unit, if you will, that does the genomic analysis, and then what we're able to do is scale that vertically within the compute unit itself using Batch. But here's what's great about the architecture of working in this way is now we can scale horizontally within, say, an AWS region. We can spin up multiple compute units. And sometimes it's enough of, why do I need another compute unit AWS account? I might be running out of IPs, actually. So the ability for us, or we might want to scale out to put genomic processing on the West Coast versus the East Coast, or in the EU versus APAC. So by using core AWS services, we've taken, again, I like the term heavy lift that we've used, away from us, and we don't have to build those type of services or maintain them. And we focus on the differentiated software that we have, and that's more part of our intellectual property, and less about how we have to actually execute those tasks. And it links what we have, our disparate labs worldwide, into the ability to process those in the cloud in different regions. So this was really, really powerful. It helped us lower our cost of goods sold. It reduced our turnaround time. We know that we can react to events. If you remember a couple of years ago, I believe it snowed in Texas. It was crazy. And that resulted in a huge backlog of samples that were going to be shipped to our labs. And then all of a sudden, we've got to catch up and make sure that we can get out these reports quick enough to these patients. And it was because of this architecture, because of this ability to scale, that enabled us to catch up very quickly and react to that event itself. And we know that if there's another type of event in the future, or there's different types of sequencing or large amounts of data that we want to do in the future, it's there. And that's from the compute standpoint. The other benefit we saw from the data transfer utility was the fact that not only is it helping us move the data from a sequencing perspective to the cloud, it also helps us and is a tool that can be extended and used for different types of data transfers, file transfers, excuse me. So for instance, we move a lot of BAM files around. Those are the output of genomic analysis. There are pathology slide images that we can move around, and we want to be able to use that data transfer utility to be able to move those around for different types of processing, whether it's a pathology review or it's some type of machine learning or AI analysis that needs to be done. And so the collaboration has been fantastic with AWS. We've really enjoyed working with them as a key partner. And these are two great examples of successes we've had in leveraging the cloud to helping us out. But I'll be back to Luke.
Thanks, Jeremy. Compelling story about really like this global lab cloud operation that you've built. And I just want to also mention heavy appreciation goes not only to the partnership, but to the AWS specialists and Ariel Assassin and Sasha Pagel, leads from our side, and many others who helped build this approach. And it's a great testament to what's possible. So 10 terabytes per day, many instrument types, sites across the world. So let's break it down into how this was achieved and what you can take away today and how you can start to think about this. So AWS Life Sciences practice has put a strategic priority on digital labs to develop guidances, partners, and architectures to help in these core areas of the lab. We break this problem down into 6 capability areas: broad-based data ingestion, data governance and metadata, discoverability. You also need your software systems in place that this can connect with, your ELN, your LIMS. You also need accessible to this, your HPC analytics and machine learning. And one of the benefits of the digital lab strategy is that you don't have to do this all at once. We're finding that data collection, governance, and discovery are foundational areas. These can be implemented for the most part implemented once for an organization to set a consistent way to bring data in, whether it's pathology or mass spec data or imaging data or flow, and to break out of the data silos they're in. So let's talk about these cloud foundations first. So you need that consistent data ingestion platform, but there's a lot of diversity in labs, genomic sequencers, bioanalyzers, mass spec, and so forth. You have simple devices, you have real-time devices. So it's a hard problem. And to help here, we have a wide array of managed services from AWS that are focused on data movement to help labs automate this. So as an example, AWS Data Sync provides performant data transfer for multi-terabyte size files, which simplifies that massive amount of data movement. S3 File Gateway lets scientists access cloud-backed files while still using their laptops and not changing any behavior. Still accessing things locally on a local device, but those are cloud-backed. AWS Transfer Family makes it easy for partnering entities to push and pull files so that you can scale the collaborations that are needed. We can talk about IoT as well for that real-time operational view. And we don't just leave you there. With these managed services, we have architectures like the one you're seeing here for how to tie them together so that you can create that performant data ingestion platform for your organization. And this architecture lays a high-level groundwork for what Foundation Medicine built and others are building in biopharma, in diagnostics, and CDMO space. And companies are using this as a guidepost to help you scale. So that's one example of how AWS can help. Another is, getting data to the cloud is the first step, right? It's not just about the data movement. That data needs to be organized. It needs to be organized in a way that aligns with how scientists use their data, right? Aligns with retention policies. Labs care about reproducibility. So you need your raw data stored in an immutable way, but you need the process data to be associated with that. You need to capture charts and graphs and PDFs that are downstream and tie those all together into a single kind of metadata tag. If you're in a regulated setting or operationalizing that data, you need to harmonize that data too, right? And bring that into QC reports, COAs, batch records. So customers are using Amazon S3 as the center for this scientific data storage by turning their data into data products. And so they do this through metadata tagging to make that data discoverable in a catalog. And this is helping companies manage these different maturity of data from raw to processed to whatever milestone, maybe filing that they have. And to help here, AWS has services, again, that can help build that unified governance approach to make sure that the right divisions within the company have access, but not others, to set integrity controls through data versioning and checksum tools. And if you need your data harmonized as well, there are ways to parse and convert and harmonize that data. And with these services, we have a white paper, the architectural guidance for data lakes, for how to set the correct controls so that you're not just working with these services on your own. However, let's say that building this metadata management system is not something you feel like doing yourself, but would rather take a solution and plug it in. And we have two partners in this area that have been in this space a long time. They understand the science deeply, and they've spent time turning this into a turnkey solution. And those are TetraScience and Quilt. Customers who have been building a metadata management system on their own have found that moving to one or both of these partners is helping them move much faster and help them take and move toward that kind of fair or flare data approach that they have, no matter where they are in the spectrum, whether you need data fully harmonized or just managed in a scientific catalog. And Jeremy showed how Foundation Medicine built their system from the ground up. Well, you might be a company that wants to maybe start and move a little faster. And so we want to point you to one biopharma company, a startup customer of ours, Resilience, who showed that you don't have to start from scratch. So in a period of 3 months last fall, they took into production a 100 instrument global lab data operation. It's spanning 6 of their sites, and they used the digital lab framework that we're talking about and Quilt as a partner. And they went fully live. And then last month, I heard they brought on another 75 instruments. And they're going live with new use cases of their data. They're connecting the data to a search portal that hundreds of users at their company can search in. They're connecting that to their ELN and their MES systems. They're connecting that to data pipelines for particular data types. So it's incredible the speed that these companies can move and the scale that you can achieve for a digital lab in such a short time now. And just a quote from Adam Mendez, who's the associate director for architecture there. The centrally managed system is helping them seamlessly integrate with systems, people, and the analytics software, whether it's first-party analytics or third-party analytics that they have. So you can learn more about their story either at the case study that we recently published, or they're actually here. Adam is here at booth 718. So we talked about cloud foundations that are creating these massively scalable connected labs. Now let's talk about how domains within your organization can build the workflows that are needed to push that science forward to your pipelines and your goals and your differentiation. And so the rest of this talk, when I talk about lab systems and HPC and analytics, it's not a one-size-fits-all here. Every organization is unique, but I want to show how AWS toolkits can help you plug in and undergird that data foundation that we were just talking about. So we've established a data foundation. Now you need software that understands that data, that can open those data sets up, that can create protocols for it, that can interpret that data. You want to be able to create those EC50 curves. And you need a scientifically relevant user interface too, right? And we're proud to have the largest ecosystem of scientific software makers as partners that are built on AWS. These are the companies that are creating the exquisite data models and the user interfaces that our scientists love and they use every day. And so to build that full flywheel, that digital lab flywheel, the first step is using cloud-based systems, that some of them which you see here, ELN and LIMS from Thermo Fisher, from Benchlink, from PerkinElmer, and other partners. They're innovating very quickly in this space. And once these systems are cloud-based, you can weave together the framework that I just shared through event-driven architecture. And EDAs, as I mentioned, lets you publish and consume events. And the services I'm showing here are low-code tools that let lab admins create workflows that can connect these systems together and make your ELN the cockpit for your laboratory, make it that central user interface. So when an experiment is ready to be started, it can push notifications to the cloud to create the right metadata tags so that cloud inherits the data model of the ELN. When new data appears in the cloud, you send an event to the ELN to let it know where it is, creating that fabric. And the ELNs can now start to farm out their heavy HPC and ML to the cloud. And that's what I'm going to discuss next, is how HPC and ML can undergird your ELN or LIMS in this digital lab. I'm going to breeze through this relatively quickly, but if you're familiar with our computing stack, Amazon EC2 at the foundational layer, it is a flexible configuration of more than 600 CPU and GPU types now, which means that researchers can get the compute performance they need and get that at the lowest cost. We allow for, not only instance type configurability, but configurability of networking and the storage that's needed for HPC workloads. You also have the options for different orchestration layers, different visualization tools. And finally, and most importantly, to focus on is this middle layer, which is the applications. And what we've done is we've created architectural patterns that are optimized for these different domains. So when you want to start a secondary analysis approach, or you want to use AlphaFold, or you want to do cryo-EM, you don't need to invent your own architecture. We've tested these out, we've benchmarked these and optimized them for you, and they're available as guidance to you. So now your computational researchers can just imagine a project. You can spin that pattern up relatively quickly and tear it down whenever the project's done. And in fact, we've taken optimization further. And as you may have heard, in about November timeframe, we launched a fully managed service called Amazon Omics. And Omics is a purpose-built service that manages your storage, your workflows, and your analytics for a number of omics types of data. And actually just today and this week was announced that Omics has expanded support for protein folding. So it really makes building workloads now actually just a few clicks or a call to an API. I'd also like to point out cryo-EM is a story that it's a workload that is growing incredibly fast. You'd be, I think if 5 years ago people said people would do cryo-EM on the cloud, you would have sort of squinted your eyes if that was possible. But it's the fastest growing bioinformatics workload that we have. And we're speaking about it tomorrow, actually, in this cloud compute session. And on top of all the data you've brought to the data mesh, now you want to gain insights from that data, right? You want to do meta-analysis across projects. You want to do supervised learning, and you want to apply this to generative models, right? And AWS has long believed and supported AI and machine learning in the life sciences. We've tried to play this key role in democratizing ML, making it accessible for those who want to use it with a broad base of AI and ML services. And we've specifically invested in ML services for life sciences. So we have Amazon Health Lake, we have Amazon Comprehend Medical, Amazon Transcribe Medical, which turn unstructured health and life sciences data into structured data. And as a result, more than 100,000 customers are using AWS for AI ML, and 9 out of the 10 top pharma are using SageMaker for ML and analytics. So we've been in this space a while, but when it comes to generative AI, which is really timely discussion, we're taking the same approach. We want to deliver to organizations a way to make it easy to and cost effective and practical for life sciences organizations to leverage generative AI. We want to make it easy for you to find the right model, to test that model, to iterate, to try another model, and to then have the broadest and most performant base of compute to be able to scale that inference to the applications that you have in a cost-effective way. You also want to do that completely securely, be able to do that in your own environments with no data leaving your accounts. And so whether you're looking to build your own foundation model, you're looking to customize an existing model, or you just want to use a service that already has Gen AI built in, we have a number of different options to help you define that generative AI strategy. And the promise of generative AI in life sciences is vast, with the potential to accelerate science, improve efficiencies. And with generative AI on AWS, you can predict protein properties, you can converse naturally with your research data, you can do utilization monitoring and find new ways to find productivity in your labs and your factories. A very interesting one that I've heard from customers is the interest to smooth the tech transfer process, to start pre-building documentation that accelerates the process as you move into manufacturing. So several of these are happening today at AWS. Several of these are aspirational, and I'm not going to dive into each one, but I want to leave you with how easy it is to get started with ML on AWS. And what we hear from life sciences customers is the need for that there's a continuum of ML needs in life sciences labs. So at one end of the spectrum, you have novice ML folks, right? These could be wet lab scientists who aren't that familiar with machine learning. These could be bioinformaticians who are great at coding, but maybe they're not full data scientists. And then you have your full professional data scientists, just to kind of simplify things. And so for the novice ML practitioners, we have an application called SageMaker Canvas, which is a completely no-code way to train and deploy ML models for tabular data, for imaging data, and for natural language processing. And for bioinformaticians who want to use even the foundational models, try a foundational model, fine-tune it, and then deploy it, we have SageMaker Studio and SageMaker RStudio. And then for full, your fully fledged data science teams, you may have, 10 different projects. You may have 50 data scientists for full-scale data science operations. We have a full ML ops workbench that can help you set up pipelines and governance and set up those different domains. So we have a spectrum of areas where you can get started pretty easily. So I'm going to wrap it up. In summary, we're seeing these digital lab architecture pillars being adopted by Foundation, by Resilience, by others to create R&D on the cloud that can scale for an organization. And this graphic shows the same capabilities as before, but now I've added how these capabilities stem from certain AWS services and the fast pace of innovation that's happening in each of them. So, each of these services, if you think about it again, goes back to those guiding principles. You want to be able to bring wet lab data to the cloud to bridge wet lab and analytics. You want to treat data as a product, and you want to bring teams together and systems together with cloud-based events. And the final take-home that I have is that you don't have to do it alone. So we've learned that while some organizations want to build things from the ground up, others prefer to buy something that's a little more off the shelf. So for customers who want to bring these capabilities on, or leaders who want to bring this to their organization and help your organization move faster, Quilt and TetraScience offer out-of-the-box solutions that can be deployed for those data foundations. And we have great partners in the ELN space, the LIM space. I'm naming a few of them here. They really own that scientific and laboratory data model and can help you create connected workflows through the cloud. So leverage these innovative companies to create your differentiation. Don't worry about the heavy lifting as much, and then connect them to those AWS services for HPC and machine learning to create that differentiated science that you're developing. And finally, for those looking for real hands-on help, we have amazing consulting partners that can help with implementation. So I hope this has been helpful in understanding the framework that we're coming from an AWS perspective, what we're seeing with customers, and hoping that you can bring together AWS services and partners to move faster across these competencies. So thanks so much, and I'll take any questions.